Bob Guccione was the owner of Penthouse magazine, and he was a wonderful gentleman. I first met Bob. I went up to his house, which was really like a compound. It's actually the largest residence in Manhattan. It's up in the Upper East Side. And you arrive there, and it's got the big oak door, and the entire house is actually a block of brownstones. It's like a block with 3 sections, so it's like a horseshoe of brownstones. It's absolutely huge. And I was greeted by his assistant, Jane, and he's got these huge Rhodesian Ridgeback dogs. And then you come into the entrance, and he did the movie Caligula. And so as you come in, it's got these like real Roman antique statues of Caesar, and he's actually got a pool that's in the hallway in his lobby. He's got a pool that's inlaid with silver. So I mean, the entire place is pretty impressive. And this was in the evening, and Bob actually was always in his study looking at every single image. He was really an artist and a perfectionist. I mean, he would choose every single photo. He would look at every little detail, every little hair, and choose exactly the right photos. He actually was a photographer, and he took the photos when he first started, and then later he'd get other photographers. And so I was there to try to sell him some photos, and I had these photos from these photographers in London that were really good, that he was really excited about. And this was like the first time meeting him. And first we had a lot in common because he'd grown up in England, or in his 20s. He was an artist in London, and so we kind of hung out the same nightclubs, and the clubs on Mayfair and the Soho House and all that kind of stuff. And so he takes me around this mansion, and he shows me the place. And when I say he's an artist, I mean, he actually was an artist himself. He actually was a painter, but he collected art. That was his great love. And he had, Picassos and Rembrandts and Matisse and Basquiat and these, paintings that he just adored. And then he had his own paintings, which were really spectacular, impressive, a little bit dark, perhaps. And he ends up cooking me spaghetti bolognese. So he was actually a really good chef, loved to cook. They said he was a bit reclusive, so he'd have these parties. He didn't really have a lot of parties at his house, but he'd have these parties, and he'd have over people like Andy Warhol and Elton John, and apparently you'd find him kind of hiding out in the kitchen, cooking for everybody. And so, the first night I met him, he actually made me spaghetti bolognese, and we hung out in the kitchen and had some red wine. And I mean, Bob was a very handsome man. When I first saw him, he was wearing the silk shirt that's with open neck and the huge gold medallions. And, he obviously was very cut. He worked out. He used to apparently do laps in his pool. He was probably the only one that ever went in the pool. He used to do laps in the evening. I think I was like 19 at the time, and he was an old gentleman, but he was definitely, he was this Adonis statuette, really took care of himself. There's this painting on the wall, and it's actually his painting. It's a very kind of classy nude picture. And he says to me that when he was in London, and he was a starving artist. He was, trying to make his way doing paintings, and he painted this beautiful nude. And apparently this businessman came to him and said, I'll pay you £5,000 for that photo, which, back in those days was an absolute fortune. And, he was hand to mouth, living, didn't have any money, and that was a huge amount of money for him. And he said, but on one condition. you have to paint over the pubic hair. Now, when you looked at this picture, it was very beautiful, but I mean, you wouldn't have even noticed if there was anything there. But this guy had said, you know, back in those days, which I guess was back in the 50s or 60s, he said, you know, you got to paint over it. You got to take some paint and, you know, make it, and just paint any of that area out. And Bob was like horrified at this. It was like, and I told him there was no way I was going to deface my art, and you know, how dare he, you know, ask that I would do that. I would never do that to my art. And I'm thinking, wow, I mean, you know, 5,000 pounds, I'd have slapped some paint on there, and you know, but that was Bob. I mean, he was, you know, art was his world. So I don't think the magazine was anywhere about the money. To him, it was his love. It was his showcase of art. And you know, when he bought photography or took photography, it was, you know, creative. It was beautiful. It was like he said, it was an art form of women. It was not exploitive, but he had kind of grown up with the whole Playboy era and seeing, you know, Playboy launch, and in his mind that was fake. That was, you know, kind of airbrush, not real. And you know, he wanted like real beauty, real eroticism, but you know, in an artistic, real way. And so he thought the whole Playboy image was just this like old-fashioned kind of farce. And I told him that I was doing some modeling, and that I was a model at the Playboy Mansion, so I, you know, was there quite often. And he was like, like, you know, that, I don't know how anybody could live like Hef. That's just, you know, a total false farce, and, you know, to put on this like public show, and that's not erotic at all, and all his girlfriends, and that's, you know, that's like everything that Bob, you know, was against. He was much more quiet and reserved. He had had a wife that had just passed away, that I think he was, you know, very much in love with. She passed from cancer. And then after that, you know, I don't think he ever had any like public girlfriends. He definitely did not have like a bunch of girls coming and going. I think he was very kind of quiet about that side of his life. I think it was pretty reclusive overall. But he was an amazing artist, and that was his thing. It was all about making, you know, the most beautiful art of these women, and it was all about how, you know, special his magazine was and the photography. And he told me that when he was back in London, he had managed to scrape together a little bit of money, and he was trying to decide between getting a dry cleaning business or putting the money into a magazine. And he had these partners, I think, that wanted to make a dry cleaning business, and he persuaded them that they should, you know, go all in and risk it and have a magazine. So, you know, that's why he developed Penthouse Magazine. Otherwise it might have been a dry cleaners.